Hello, my name is Ilarian, and today I have something actually crazy for you. I will dare call it the ultimate ancient Greek rap battle. I am of course not talking about a real rap battle. Rap wasn't invented until modern times. However, there was something similar in ancient Greece. I am talking about the epic duel of Homer and Hesiod. There is a wonderful book by Mikhail Gasparov called Fascinating Greece, where I first saw the mention of this poetic duel. He says this simply: there were two Greek epic poets, Homer and Hesiod. And as legend says, once Homer and Hesiod came together at a festival in Chalcis, a city in ancient Greece, Hesiod started an epic duel of poetry with his greatest contemporary that would decide who was the greatest bard of all of ancient Greece. Now, who were the contestants? You probably have heard of Homer, or even were forced to read the Iliad or the Odyssey in school or college. It is important to understand that Homer is considered one of the greatest poets of all time, but he was not a poet. In fact, he might not have even lived. Some say that his persona was invented to explain the authorship of the Iliad and the Odyssey. The most common narrative was that Homer lived sometime after the Trojan War in the 8th or 7th century BCE, around the same time as Hesiod. He was a blind bard and Aeodoi. Aeodos were ancient Greek singers slash poets who composed epic poems and sung them to some music played on a lyre, for example. Later, Aeodos became called rhapsodes. Now, I don't want to be blamed for calling Homer a rhapsode because the title might have appeared a century or two after Homer and Hesiod. I also don't want to be blamed for thinking of rhapsodes as rappers. They were very different after all. However, I really like to think of this event as a rap battle and of Homer and Hesiod as ancient Greek rapper celebrities because it just makes imagining this event so much more fun. Returning to the contestants. While we have no proof of Homer's existence, historians are quite certain that Hesiod was a real person who lived between 750 and 650 BCE. Hesiod had a style of singing about real-world issues, in contrast to Homer, who mostly focused on wars and legends. Hesiod wrote a couple of written works that survive to our day. One of them is called Works and Days. There he mentions an agon, a poetical competition he participated in, though he never mentions Homer. Another text called The Contest of Homer and Hesiod tells the story in more detail. Now, the text comes from a source that dates back to the 2nd century CE, but it might be a copy of even earlier text. The text expands on Hesiod's mention of the contest and creates a whole new narrative out of it. The author is unknown and the text is definitely a fictionalized narrative, but it is interesting nevertheless, as it can tell us a lot about how ancient Greeks saw their culture and their history. I will use the translation of Hugh Evelyn White today. So, here we are. It is a festival in the ancient Greek city of Chalcis. Homer and Hesiod come together and Hesiod offers a contest to decide who is the best. From the start, the contest was rigged, because Hesiod called Homer to compose poems of advice, not Homer's specialty. Hesiod asks, "Tell me first, what is best for mortal man?" Homer answers, "For man on earth, 'tis best never to be born at all, or being born to pass through the gates of Hades with all speed." Probably the gloomiest answer possible. Then Hesiod tries a different approach. "Come, tell me now this also, godlike Homer. What do you think in your heart is most delightsome to man?" But Homer answers quite plainly that the best in life is when people feast well. Hesiod understood that Homer is good at poems of advice, so he changed the strategy. Now Homer had to complete verses that Hesiod started. But Hesiod's lines were internally contradictory. Then they died on the flesh of oxen and their horses' necks. Homer continues. Their horses' necks unyoked, released, dripping with sweat when they had had enough of war. Hesiod attempts another trick. Now when they had poured libations and deeply drunk the surging sea, Homer places a comma in another place and continues. And deeply drunk, comma, the surging sea they minded to traverse on well-built ships. Here Homer also could not be defeated. Now, everyone thought that Homer was way better and that he would win. So, the last part of a contest came, where each poet had to sing a verse from their poems that they considered the very best. And here Homer started singing about battles. He sang, quote, "The ranks stood firm about the two Aeances, such that not even Ares would have scorned them had he met them," etc., etc., etc. And here Homer made a fatal mistake, because Hesiod started singing about, guess what? About sowing. The crowd clearly thought that Homer would win, but the king had different thoughts. He gave the crown to Hesiod, because he who called upon men to follow peace and husbandry would have a prize rather than one who dwelt on war and slaughter. Fun fact, this actually created the Greek proverb Peneides vote after the king who judged the Aegon. It was used for controversial or unexpected decisions where substance was favored over style. I think that the victory of Hesiod carries to us an important lesson over the centuries, because how even if you might be a better musician, a poet, a rapper, whatever, what you say is as important or even more important than how you say it. We can see for ourselves, we can see this lesson being taught to us everywhere. For example, in the book Lord of the Flies, the kids on a deserted island divide into the majority that want to hunt and have fun, and a very small minority of kids that want to keep a fire going to be noticed and saved from the deserted island. The crowd might favor those who talk of war and fighting, but that is not always what should be praised. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more interesting history stories.